I know what you're thinking. Did I expect to be making an episode about X-Men 97? The answer is probably yes. I kind of figured I would. But did I think I would need to break out the Baron Zemo action figure to do that? No, I did not. Yet, here we are. After episode 8 of season 1 of X-Men 97, it's called Tolerance is Extinction, part 1 of 3, from what I understand. We just got a pretty clear picture of what this series is going to be, like what the end game of this series I would say is. Finally see some of our characters kind of coming together, and we've been introduced to the big threat. I will say, first of all, the end of the episode is something that I was kind of like, that might happen eventually, right? And I think that was something that was pretty clear to X-Men fans for a while. Was like, it's unlikely that this whole series is going to go on, and by the end, Magneto is still going to be a good guy, right? Like, we're going to see Magneto go from really trying to doing his best, and then like, you know what? Never mind. Let's just do what we were going to do before, and massacre humanity or whatever. And I do think they made the case for like, Magneto's got a point, and they did the whole Magneto was right thing, which for people that don't know has always been something X-Men fans have said, I think, as long as I can remember, but it was something that came up during the Grant Morrison era. Characters say Magneto was right shirts started to appear, and it's been like a thing that X-Men characters will say, and X-Men fans will say sometimes. And I think after Genosha, it's hard to be like, Magneto was wrong. Like, I don't know if at the end of the show, the message is going to be, Magneto was right, Professor was wrong. But I do think the way that they set up this Magneto turn is interesting because of how it is different from the comics. Let's say, all right, one thing real quick, Magneto's done stuff like this before, right? Not just like kill a bunch of people or do a big magnetic attack thing, but like specifically mess with the Earth's magnetism. I can think of 3 examples. There's one which we'll talk about. Obviously, we'll get to that one. There's the time he does it during the Morrison era, and he's like super hopped up on evil drugs and stuff. And then there's the time Magneto did something like this during Ultimatum, although I don't know exactly what that was. Ultimatum, it's a different Magneto, because it was in the Ultimate Universe, but Magneto basically like flooded New York and did a bunch of terrorism and whatever, and killed lots and lots of characters. It was this big moment where like, oh, we can't come back from that, and they had to kill him. But the main time this happened, and according to Bo DeMeo, the creator of X-Men 97, apparently his favorite issue of the X-Men comics is X-Men number 25. It is known as Fatal Attraction, which I never put together, like attraction magnets and stuff. But basically, Magneto's got a space station where him and his acolytes are living, and the government tries to lock Magneto out of Earth. Like, they put together the Magneto protocols or whatever it is, and Magneto's like, that's not cool to do. And because it works, it does like stop him from, if he goes into the Earth's atmosphere, he loses his powers and will die. But he can still affect the Earth's magnetic field from space. So he makes an EMP that, wipes out power for some amount of time. And it is like, this is treated in universe, and understandably so, like a big deal. Like, it's Xavier at this point is like, I didn't want to have to kill Magneto, but I think we gotta go kill Magneto. I'm gonna put on some armor, you guys put on some armor, we're gonna go suicide mission and kill Magneto, and then that's pretty much the plan. Obviously what they did here was different, is they gave Magneto a pretty compelling reason to use the EMP. And Wolverine's saying like, he's declared war, which is true, but that's not why he did this. And it's not like in the original book where he does it because they've just locked him out of Earth and he's like, all right, fine, I'll break all your stuff. This is more of a like, I have to do an EMP, otherwise all the mutants are going to get killed by all your stupid robot zombie guys. So, whatever happens, happens. But I'm sure there'll be lots of aftermath with planes falling out of the sky and stuff like that. And it'll get blamed on Magneto. I mean, those Russian scientists are going to get destroyed by Omega Red, which is pretty funny. But depending on how long it takes for the power to go back, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of people, like millions of people will die during this, and lots of other people be injured, and it'd be a huge disaster. I wonder if this happened at night, could you sleep through it, because there wouldn't be anything to make noise, and people would probably start screaming or something like that, like, oh, our power's out. But I could see that if this is like a 20-minute long thing, because eventually the power does come back, I mean, a lot of people would sleep through it. You just wake up and go on your phone and be like, oh, I missed it, but it seems pretty bad. So I think it's interesting that now he's public enemy number 1, like in the book, but unlike in the book, he's doing it for a completely different reason. And even if there weren't Sentinels, but Magneto just got really mad because of what happened on Genosha, I would still feel like that's a more reasonable response than what was in the Fatal Attraction book. So like, I think that's clever. the way they set that up. Well, you know what? No. Also, Bastion. This is not a note necessarily. You could put clothes on Magneto. You could put, like clothes made of like cloth on Magneto. It's not just no magnets on him. I mean, he's got his thingy. Like he's not, he can't use his magnetism power. So I guess my question is either put some clothes on him or no clothes on him. But why you put his little black Speedo? Like, why is that the decision we've made for Magneto? It's funny. Like, it sucks for Magneto. It's bad for Magneto, but just, it's a choice. Bastion's making choices. What else did we learn? Val Cooper's a bad guy, and now she's probably not Mystique, although I do still think she might be Mystique. I did like that she got the Magneto is right in line. That whole conversation was very good. I'm still loving Theo James's Bastion. I love that he does Zoom calls with villains, like a classic villain. Is excited to see Doctor Doom. I was wondering about this, like, what was the conversation? And it seems like what Bastion had set up with them was like, here's what I'm going to do. Mutants are going to take over the world. I'm sure you guys have already kind of seen it. Here's how we can deal with that. And I'm imagining most of these guys, especially your Doctor Dooms, are like, all right, you do that. I'm keeping an eye on you, but whatever. I have a feeling your Baron Zemos are probably like a little bit more like, oh, cool, we got invited to this. I'm happy that people are taking us seriously now. And then the other woman, who I assume is Madam Hydra, or maybe Melina or something, some Russian operative or something like that. I do think it's interesting that Bastion has seemingly established some sort of coalition, because that's not always how these stories go. It could totally work that just him, Sinister, and some of these Sentinel characters like Master Mold and Trask and stuff doing all of this. And then obviously we got to look at Spider-Man this week, which is pretty unusual, but great looking Spider-Man. And definitely the Spider-Man that you would expect to see in this universe. Didn't get any lines, but still, it was a good start. Let's talk about Morph. Morph kind of stinks, right? That's their deal right now in this series. They're just not good at fighting. They have all the superpowers, but they just cannot effectively use any of them. Because we have seen Morph do some cool stuff and turn into some characters that are cool, and almost immediately get bodied every single time. Like I was saying last week, I was like, well, if Morph can just turn into anything and mass doesn't seem to be an issue, and he kind of gets the superpowers associated with that thing, just turn to Galactus and eat the planet or something. But I'm like, I feel like Morph would do that, and then Bastion would just uppercut him in the chin, and they'd fall over and die in space because Morph just loses fights. I think like the Juggernaut one, I was like, oh, that's a pretty good one to pick. It's almost like, hey, you could have been Juggernaut for like a lot of these guys. Juggernaut would have also probably been pretty useful for fighting, those mutant protesters in the second episode. I think that there are a lot of moving pieces currently, so it's probably hard for everybody to just sit down and go, all right, so let's just talk battle strategy right now. If they did, I do feel like they would have to have a little bit of like, Morph, what are we doing here? Like, how are you not using any of these powers usefully? Like, you keep getting beat up. You want to pick maybe one power and start getting really good at that? Like Nightcrawler and Wolverine, they're pretty good at their powers. I mean, Wolverine finally got to do some stuff, and I'm not saying finally, because again, people like myself who grew up with this stuff, Wolverine's been doing so much stuff the whole time that it's nice to see a show that doesn't give Wolverine every single action set piece. Like, it was pretty fun watching him fly around, cut dudes in half, and then obviously seeing Nightcrawler teleporting and sword fighting and stuff is fantastic. I think Nightcrawler being upgraded to like main cast member of this team is a great decision. I also like that Rogue was kind of out for this episode. Rogue has clearly had like her moment. Last episode was her episode basically, and now it's somebody else's episode. It does feel like the cast is big and there's this big group of mutants, but outside of a couple who are always kind of around, like Morph and Wolverine, we do kind of shift focus so that everybody gets their moments. What else is fun? Everything crashed. There's a lot of crashes. The Blackbird crashed for a third time, which is very funny. That thing just cannot stop crashing. Sunspot basically just crashed into the whole thing, like he fell into the party. I do feel like for Jubilee, I'm like, man, can everybody fly but me? It's like, yeah, I guess so. And honestly, I'm surprised you can't. Seems like you kind of learned from your, computer version of you from the Mojo episode how to maybe fly, and you should probably have figured that out by now. And then, and they crashed the car. That was fun. Wolverine crash landed into the house. That's an interesting little thing that keeps happening. I think the Bastion origin is interesting. So what I'm reading is he's a technopath or something, mutant that has something to do, or maybe mutate, because it comes from being infected by future Sentinel goo. And like, so he's the child of Sentinels, which originally he really was. The story was so weird. It was Master Mold and Bastion pushed through a magic door together to form him into a guy. This is a little bit less silly than that. You don't have to involve the magic door. But I do think we've kind of gone through it pretty quickly, where Jean was just like, oh, he's like all the Sentinels. Damn it, that's bad. All right, we're going to move on. Because we don't have to explain all that stuff. I think that's handy. What do we think of the Summers family? Man, they seem like they're having a good time. Mom Jean is fun. Mom Jeans. I like that. I like that she's like, buckle your seatbelt, mister. That was cute. Speaking of Summers family, we also saw Rachel in the future, evil future flash forward thing. That's interesting. I wonder what that means about the world. Because I feel like Rachel comes from a pretty specific timeline. I don't know. I mean, who cares? But also, it's like, it's kind of like this magic thing where it's like, well, then what is she in this universe? What is magic here? Did she happen? Did she not happen? With Rachel, it's a little bit more confusing. But I don't know. I'm just a little curious. It doesn't really matter. It's cool to see Rachel. Let's say, what do we think for the actual finale? Here's the question. Is the series going to end? So as season 1, I guess, of this series, is it going to end with the end of the theme song? Is it going to be Magneto forms the Brotherhood of Mutants? Some of those guys might even be in it. I mean, like, some of them sure can. Definitely get Avalanche. White Queen still exists. Juggernaut's there. Deathstrike is there. Whichever ones you want. I feel like Thunderbird is there sometimes. But whatever. Get some of them. And then Sentinels. And then the X-Men have to kind of stop those two, groups from destroying all of humanity. Like, I feel like I wouldn't even be surprised if the big splash page image is the intro brought to life with like all the X-Men, running in a line towards all of Magneto's guys. I imagine Magneto will form a team of guys. I hope Strong Guy doesn't join the team. He was the guy who was like, get ready for war, kids. And now I'm like, you probably want him on your war team. That's the other thing. Magneto doesn't have a ton of allies out here that we know of, right? Like we've got Blob, we've seen Acolyte woman whose name I forgot again, Vought or Volt, Amelia Vought, I think is her name. What other side characters are like people that have shown up or people that would usually align with Magneto? No, there aren't that many. Like, I mean, we've seen a lot of mutants that have just existed, right? Like if Magneto started picking up all of the cameo mutants, so, Dazzler, Multiple Man, Strong Guy, Blob, like Leech, Tommy, and just made like a super group of all the mutants that we've seen that have been wronged by the Sentinels. Like White Queen could be part of that group. I think that would make sense. I don't think you could just call all the guys and be like, Pyro, wherever you are, you're part of this now. I do think we'll get an Asteroid Dam situation, but even that I don't think is as interesting as what I feel like will have to be. Like, I think this season will have to end with Utopia or something. Like, the mutants establishing what is essentially Krakoa, but less magical, but more just like, we are here now. This is our like zone, and you got to respect kind of sovereignty. I would not be surprised if that's where this ends up, which I think is interesting because I didn't expect that. But I love that run, like the Uncanny, like the Kieran Gill and all that stuff is very fun. Speaking of that run, Sinister's in it. Sinister's very funny. I like that Sinister just calls him just like, everything's wrong. Like, so that's cool. I just like that Sinister got a name check for Dr. Mengele, the famous Nazi scientist, torturer guy. So that's interesting. I guess the kids will probably Google that today and learn some stuff. And some adults probably will too. I don't understand. I know why he's a vampire and stuff in these shows, and that's what he's been already. But I do think when we eventually bring him into the MCU, like, let's make him British. I don't understand why this character is British. He hangs out with like Charles Darwin in London. His name's Nathaniel Essex. And somehow he lost that accent by just hanging out in the Savage Land, I guess, or whatever. Like wherever Egypt, somehow he completely lost it. But like, yeah, it's a cool accent. He should have it. First stuff I'd like in the finale. I mean, Professor X leading a team to fight Magneto would be cool. Sentinel, Apocalypse, like not the Apocalypse, the character, but Apocalypse just like that could be cool. You know what else we could do? I do think you could do Hope, and then next season could almost be Avengers X-Men. We've obviously teased that a lot here, besides just showing Quicksilver and stuff. Obviously Captain America's fighting Rogue. We've got Spider-Man now. We're throwing some of these other, like they very slowly started opening this universe up to include more of these characters. And like if we're talking about X-Men events that come after this, after like this Jim Lee era, you know, that 90s into 2000s, which the Ease for Extinction and all those storylines, like you were starting to bump up against some of those. You know, obviously we're doing House of M, but I don't think we do House of M here because we don't have any reality warpers that like matter. And Scarlet Witch is not a big player in this show. But if we get that out of the way, then you can do Hope. Yeah, I think, okay, here's what I think we do. Schism, we do 2 groups. One group led by Cyclops is the Utopia team, like in the books. And I imagine that would be, in this group, that would be Cyclops, Rogue, Wolverine, Jean maybe, although I'm not fully convinced she would do it, and Beast. And then Storm takes Wolverine's role, starts the Xavier Institute for Children and stuff, like what was the Jean Grey Institute, but is now just like restarts it as like the new headmaster. Because I think Xavier either has to die or just like kind of has to step back. But I could see Xavier sacrificing himself to kill Magneto or something like that. Although that's kind of a bummer for that character. He used to be King of Space. It was almost King of Space, and then he was like, no, I have to go help my students, and then he just dies. But that is how that happens. Storm, Jubilee, Sunspot, Nightcrawler, Morph. Although Morph would probably go with Wolverine, but still, I feel like we gotta kind of, you know, split these teams up. And then that becomes the new school. And then we do like Generation X, maybe even Emma joins on this team. Emma and Storm are fun together. Like there's some interesting pairings you can get there. But yeah, I feel like we're gonna get a more like militant Cyclops, maybe, and a Storm that is kind of not like at peace, but feels like, because she's in a really good space right now, and Cyclops is still kind of a mess. But yeah, we'll do Blue and Gold team. Scott is leading the Utopia mutants, trying to start the mutant colony. Maybe they go to Savage Land. I mean, they could go anywhere. And then or rebuild Genosha. And then Storm restarting the school. That's a guess. It's completely a guess. I imagine Magneto by the end of this is dead. Or just like in jail or something. But I don't think we're going to get much more of him. And yeah, we'll have this big moment where someone sacrifices himself and dies to save everybody. It can't be Xavier. It can't be... It could be Xavier. It can't be Jean. She's already died. Can't be Storm. I don't think it could be Cyclops. That would stink. Or Rogue. Yeah, I think it probably will be Charles. Just one more big one for students, like taking, you know, saving everybody. So yeah, loved it. Show's great. Best show. That's all I got. Follow me here, and I will probably make one of these next week. Bye.